So, I don't really have so much of an agenda what I'm talking about today. Normally, when I try to do these, I try to figure out to some extent what I'm going to talk about first. If I'm going to take off my boots, I normally do that first, I guess. I guess one of the big things I wanted to talk about was truth and utility. I guess after fashion is probably the best way to explain it. I was watching a podcast with David Buss, who's the father of evolutionary psychology. In a very real sense, that's not overstating it. There's what's the phenomenon I'm trying to look to? There's a common phenomenon in human interaction, which is we feel as though we have and we understand the truth of things. And if only for this other group who do not understand the truth, how do we breach their biases? How do we make this other group that is ignorant drop their ignorance so they can see the way, the truth, and the light of the thing we're talking about? And which was it? It was The Sad Truth with Godsad, if that's how you say his name. Anyway, just look for David Buss on the internet. You'll probably find it. It was interesting to me how few videos there were and how none of them had over 200,000 views, considering how luminary he is on a lot of his topics. But one of the things that they were discussing was some of these things are so obviously true. How do we breach through? And this, consequently, their video was in 2016, I believe, if I'm remembering right. I can't remember when in 2016, but anyway, they were talking about how do we breach through to like the social scientists, for example, the people who they were trying to understand the points of resistance to something that they felt were the obvious truth. You know, if you look at psychology through a human lens, how can you help but see that what they're revealing is true? And if that's the case, if that were true, how do we penetrate and permeate the ignorance of these people, and what is the cause of their ignorance, right? Like, and this was whether or not they were tenured or had spent their entire career devoted to this one instantiation of this topic. And maybe that was the threat vector that they were responding to when presented with an obvious truth, and how do you persevere through their roadblocks and their backfire effect. But they're incorrect in how they're analyzing and assessing this phenomena. They're looking at it as these people are ignorant. Why are they ignorant? How do we address that problem? But that's not accurate. You know, the primary modality or impetus or whatever the technical term that someone will call me a fucking idiot because I don't understand is, whatever the thing is that's causing them to react negatively to the hypothesis they're positing and the requisite evidence is not about, as a matter of primacy, I don't think the fact that they're challenging their establishment position in the hierarchy, and I get why they're getting to that conclusion. It makes obvious sense when you look at it through that, but it's like, in much the same way they're talking about evolutionary biology and how one of the things they like about it is it explains everything. Their response to why these people are ignorant does not explain everything. You know, there is a motivation in human beings to try to hold on to their hierarchical position and to try to continue to maintain the levers of power that they have managed to architect. So I understand why they can leap to that as an obvious conclusion, but I still do not think they are accurate in their assessment of what the issue is. There is that they are struggling against the ignorance of people. So what is causing them to be ignorant? I think the way they're phrasing that question is wrong and incorrect. And the reason I think that is because I think there's a misunderstanding of truth as it relates to the importance of something that is true to human beings in the manner of our existence. It's, if you take, for example, the smartphone, the internet, computers, automobiles, the wheel, fire, there's no debate as to the utility to human beings of these things. There is no conversation about whether or not the value they propose is true or not. So part of what I think they're misunderstanding in their assessment of when they're looking at other academics, in particular the social sciences, and they're thinking, oh, how are these people ignorant to the truth? It's not that they're ignorant to the truth, it's that proper understanding of a universal axiom is not the most important vector to humanity as it exists. Which is to say, you can present human beings some fact, some axiomatic truth of the nature of the universe. You can present that to human beings in a way in which they do not give a fuck. And I think the reason for that is not that human beings are ignorant or that they don't care or that they're trying to figure out how to preserve their hierarchical station, or they're trying to figure out how to not make their focus and endeavors in their career like not mean nothing. It's that when you put it through the lens of analyzing it through like the virtue and nature of fire, the reason fire matters the way it does, the reason the wheel matters the way it does, and automobiles and computers and the internet and smartphones, the way that the reason those things matter the way they do is not simply that they are tapping into truth, as in what is accurate, what is factual. It's that the truth and the purpose of finding the truth only matters in so much as it provides the programmed locus of motivation inside of human beings, a means to manipulate and control their environment in a manner that the method is less expensive than the consequence and resulting benefit to an extraordinary degree. So, to phrase this another way, you could tell human beings that the earth revolves around the sun, but the truth of that is, who cares? Why does that matter? Like, why does anybody give a shit about that? Nobody does. But if you tell human beings that the earth revolves around the sun, and I'm going to provide you a way in which you can utilize this truth in a way that it impacts your life and it matters and it's important, and the amount of effort it takes from you to utilize this tool is insignificant compared to the reward, which is substantial. This is why fire matters, right? Like, is making a fire hard if you've never done it before out in the wild with no tools, no utilities? Sure. But is making a fire really that hard compared to the utility that cooking meat provides you? Like, really, in the ultimate calculus of it, is that hard? The value that cooked meat provides you in comparison to the difficulty of making fire without tools? Like, what's the effort benefit ratio of that action? And it's astronomical, right? So when you're looking at something like evolutionary psychology, for example, you're saying this is the truth, this is why people act the way they do. It's like, that's all well and good, but how do I use that in a way that matters to me, in a way that improves my life substantially, in a manner that it's so obvious that people can't help but use it? You know, like the internet. Internet's a really good example of this. There's debates on the borders about why you should and should not use the internet, and how interacting with videos matters and doesn't matter because of what it does or doesn't do to your brain. But the thing nobody can deny is the utility and the value of the internet. And in terms of the average person utilizing and leveraging it, it's borderline effortless. What do you have to have? a computer that's connected to a service that somebody has already built for you and literally just charges you a dollar amount to connect to. So all you have to do is give somebody $20 and suddenly you have access to a knowledge base that is more expansive than the Library of Alexandria at its height. Like, who can argue the utility of that? You know, the internet is truth that matters. Understanding evolutionary psychology is not yet a truth that matters in the same way that the internet does. So when people are discussing why is the other side ignorant, it's not the other side is ignorant. That's incorrect. It's that the other side is pointing out to you that you have not met the measure of which truth matters to human modality and interaction within the space in which they live. If you were to take evolutionary psychology, for example, and convert it into a tool or utility that anybody could use, and they could see with minimal effort on their end and minimal understanding of what the mechanisms are, how it works, right? Because remember, very few people understand how the internet works. Very few people understand how smartphones work, automobiles work. Like, that's all like arcane knowledge to them, but they can all use it very simply. So if you can take evolutionary psychology and turn it into something like that, where people can use it simply and easily with minimal understanding in a way that provides maximal benefit to themselves, their children, their environment, once you reach that level of understanding of the subject matter and how human beings can use it, that's when it becomes truth that matters. Because nobody at that point can argue with you about the utility of it, because everybody knows it. Right? Like, you take smartphones and people talking about raising their children around smartphones. There's lots of conversation about, I need to limit my children's access to smartphones because of all the negative possible consequences it has on their like growth and their intellectual development, right? But nobody's having that conversation from the aspect of thinking they're going to teach their children to never ever want to use smartphones. Like, nobody's that fucking stupid. Like, they get it. Having a smartphone is so fucking powerful. There is no way they're ever going to talk their children out of ever having a smartphone, short of being Amish, and that's going to be less than like 0.01% of the population that identifies with that mode of thought, right? It's going to be a rounding error. So when people are talking about anything that they believe to be the truth, and it's like, I have the evidence and I have the research and I have the basis to understand this, like, how can you look at this and not see that it's the truth? The question is not whether or not it is evolutionary factually accurate. Nobody gives a shit about that, and nor should they. That's not what they're designed to care about. There's a reason that the sensory homunculus doesn't have our brains being 3 times the size of our body. It's our fucking hands, because we're designed to interact with the environment, modify it, bend it to our will, you know, obey nature so we can command it. Like, that's what we're geared to do. So you can tell me truth all day long, but unless I can use the truth to improve my circumstance, it doesn't fucking matter. So that's what was very striking to me about that conversation in particular, because it's not like Buss or Saad are wrong about what they're talking about, whether or not it's factually accurate. Like, evolutionary psychology is extremely compelling in its evidentiary basis, but it's not compelling in its utility, which is sort of like this sort of lens to the supposition by Musk of why he prefers Edison over Tesla. It's not because Tesla didn't have better ideas, it's because Edison brought his ideas to market, right? The thing that matters about the truth is not that you're right. The thing that matters about truth is that you have it packaged and usable and accessible in a way that it can drastically impact people's lives. And if you don't have that, no amount of barking and howling at the moon about how right you are fucking matters. And it was very interesting to me how much people that are as smart and intelligent as Buss and Saad did not seem to understand this in the course of the conversation. It's like, maybe they do. Maybe I'm being unfair, but they definitely had that moment of where they were talking about these other people, these others, these foolish that simply did not understand the truth of what they were talking about. And how do they break through to these people that, in the face of such obvious, overwhelming truth, how can they possibly break through their overwhelming ignorance to make them see the accuracy of what they're saying? And it's like, well, there is a way you do that. But it's by providing them overwhelming utility in a way that cannot be ignored, in a way that the average human being who doesn't understand a fucking thing you're talking about cannot help but utilize the thing you have provided because the obvious advantage it gives. And the thing that I thought about this that occurred to me that I thought was interesting was that is truth. Truth isn't a factually accurate representation of physical or chemical relationship or action or interaction between objects and humanity and biology and evolution. Like, that's not truth. Is it factually accurate? Sure, but it's not truth. Truth is a grasp and mastery of an understanding of things that are factually accurate and a way to translate those into utility that is so overpowering that people cannot help but use them because the utility that it provides them cannot be ignored. That's why the truth is fire. That's why the truth is the wheel, the automobile, computers, the internet, smartphones. That's why those things are the truth. That humans go through mating selection because of curvature of lumbars and the attractive nature of it. It's like, that is factually accurate, but it's not the truth, not in a way that matters. Again, hands are the big part of the homunculus. Manipulation, interaction with the environment, that's the thing we're designed for. That's the truth we give a shit about. Facts outside of that are irrelevant to us. We don't give a fuck. And that's why you'll get into arguments where people think, yeah, maybe you found something that's factually accurate, but there's some aspect of this you don't understand. And clearly that's true. That's accurate, because if there wasn't an aspect of that you didn't understand, if there wasn't something you were missing in your analysis and calculus, you would have already figured out the utility to humanity that was so overwhelming that they couldn't help but adhere to the product that you had laid out in front of them. Those people that are arguing against Saad and Bus, it's not that they're stupid, and it's not that they're ignorant, and it's not that they're adhering to some survival backfire mechanism where they live inside of their hierarchy and they're trying to protect their position. There's some of that, but that's not the most important aspect of it. The most important aspect of it is they're pointing out there's some part of this truth, there's some part of this fact that you haven't translated to practical utility to human beings. Because of that, you don't understand the truth. And you know what? They're right. They are 100% correct. That's interesting. It's not about how good your ideas are. It's whether or not you can bring them to market and put them in front of people in a way that when they try to use what you're selling them, they find the utility of it so overwhelming that they can't possibly deny what you're putting in front of them is the truth, not facts, not accurate calculation, not math, like truth. Truth is a human concept. Truth is, how do I use this to improve my circumstance, my situation? How do I take what you have given me and make everything about my life better with minimal understanding, with minimal effort? That's the fucking truth. That's why the car is the truth, right? That's why the internet is the truth. That people look for symmetry in facial lines for purposes of attractiveness, that's a fact. It's not the truth. Truth is something different entirely. And I think that's something that if someone's looking to pursue this endeavor genuinely, if someone's looking to understand the nature of humanity in a way that matters, understanding the facts are a precursor to understanding the truth. But the facts aren't what matter. The truth is the relevance, and you will know the truth by people's inability to not utilize it. That's truth. Facts are what academics argue about so they can feel like they're right. Nobody else gives a shit.